All right, I think we'll get started. Hi everyone. Welcome to IHA's webinar. This is Addressing Accessibility, How to Create an Accessible PowerPoint. I'm Julie McKinney, and I'm going to be moderating today and just go through a few housekeeping things, and then I'll turn it over to Shania, who will do the presentation. So feel free to use the chat button to comment. Just make sure that put it on everyone if you want it to go to everyone. And you can switch it to hosts and panelists. If you have a question, technical difficulty, then put it on hosts and panelists, or you can give us a chat, or you can email support@healthliteracysolutions.org. We'll put that in the chat in just a minute. If you have questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom. It's farther to the right. And that'll make it a little bit easier for us to manage the questions. Shania will take the questions at the end. And let's see, the webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on the IHA website later this week, or in a few days anyway. And if you are looking for credits for CE credits, you will get by email an evaluation, and once you submit that evaluation, then you will get the credits. Okay, so just again, so you'll get the PowerPoint, and you'll get the recording on the IHA site, and and after you do the evaluation, you'll get CE credits. We can have the next slide. Let me see if I missed anything. Yeah, no, I think that's it. So we will introduce Shania now. We're really happy to have her coming to talk about accessibility in PowerPoints. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. Shania Vicks serves as the Community Health Equity and Outreach Educator at the Howard County Health Department in Columbia, Maryland, where she engages in strategic communications and program development and evaluation for priority populations with a health equity lens. Shania previously worked in health settings at both the local and state levels, where she spearheaded community injury prevention and health disparity program initiatives. Wow, with that experience, Shania, it sounds like you're probably in very high demand for speaking at webinars. And just one thing, she also worked as a health teacher for neighboring school systems. So Shania, welcome. We're so happy to have you, and we look forward to listening.
Great, thank you so much. And I just want to thank everybody for your time here today. You kind of see me looking, I have two screens going on, so just bear with me today, but it's a pleasure being here with you all. I definitely appreciate your presence here today as we discuss the topic of addressing accessibility, specifically how we are going to create an accessible PowerPoint. So I'm sure a lot of us use PowerPoints. We're using one today. So this topic, I think, will be beneficial to everyone who's attending here. So I know you all will learn something. I'm still learning even as I give these presentations. So again, just thank you all for your presence. So the word accessibility, in short, accessibility really just refers to the promotion of access or the removal of barriers, right? So as we refer to it today, accessibility will be how we are going to design our health communication tools, specifically the PowerPoint, to be usable by people with disabilities or individuals with disabilities. That way they can have greater access to the information and the resources that are provided. In healthcare specifically, professionals often fail to communicate effectively and appropriately with people with disabilities. And this is really just a major barrier to the delivery of quality of healthcare for people with disabilities. So as we go out into the communities, or as we present to various organizations virtually, we never truly know who is in our audience. We don't necessarily know their abilities, their disabilities, or even the barriers someone may face just trying to access care or basic everyday needs, right? So understanding accessibility, its scope, and its impact can really enhance our health communication tools so that everyone has an equal opportunity to grasp the health information that we're trying to present, okay? So think about this. And I am telling on myself, right? Have you ever experienced a time when you're sitting in a room with your friends or your family and everyone around you breaks out in laughter, but you didn't hear the joke? And so now you're kind of feeling awkward. You might feel a little left out, right? This happens to me all the time. I swear I just zone out sometimes. Some of us might even chuckle a little bit and pretend as if we heard the joke. That's definitely me too. I think my other career should be an actor because I definitely fake it. But just imagine, right? That's how someone may feel when you're giving a presentation without a reasonable accommodation, and someone in the audience completely misses what was said, and now they feel left out of the group or as if they've missed something really important. So it's one thing to miss a joke, but it's another thing to miss really important, potentially life-saving health information. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about disability awareness and some of the barriers some people may face when accessing these resources. We'll also further address the importance of accessibility as we do outreach in the community, as well as some of the best practices when developing and giving our PowerPoint presentations. So why exactly is the topic of disability so important? Well, approximately 61 million people in the United States have a self-reported disability. That's 1 in 4 adults with a disability that requires an accessible product, an accessible service, or a support. So that most certainly makes people and individuals with disabilities members of a public health priority population. People with disabilities are more likely to experience poverty and negative health outcomes when compared to people without disabilities. And this is for a variety of reasons. So, for example, some adults with disabilities were more likely to report not being able to see a doctor in the last 12 months due to cost barriers that typically result from having lower rates of employment. People with disabilities also experience more health disparities than people without disabilities, such as obesity, high blood pressure. They may be more likely to smoke cigarettes or engage in lower levels of physical activity, which further contributes to greater rates of heart disease, stroke, cancer, all of these compared to people without disabilities. So as health professionals and community health workers, we want to make sure that everyone has equal and full access to the supports and services across the lifespan so that we can all thrive as individuals in a given community. Now, there is a wide diversity of people and abilities, but what we must remember is that differences in abilities are really a normal part of our human experience. However, one of the biggest barriers, one of the biggest struggles faced by individuals with disabilities is the struggle for increased accessibility. And this looks different for many people and can take many forms. Disabilities can be temporary, they can be permanent, they could be visible to the eye or unnoticeable. They can even be acquired at birth or even later in adulthood. There are many reasons why people may experience varying degrees of vision deficiencies, hearing impairments, speech, cognitive, physical disabilities. So think of a person who may have just had a baby. They may need temporary access to a curb ramp to push their stroller onto a sidewalk or into a county building. So that's an example of a temporary disability that one experiences later in life, right? Pregnancy. On the other hand, you may have someone with ADHD who may need an accessible product or service that fits their needs across the lifespan. So you can see the different varying abilities that exist, right? And there are so many other examples, but those are just two. But one of the biggest barriers to care is our attitude, or something that's known as ableism. And at its heart, ableism really just perpetuates this negative view of disability and is rooted in the assumption that people with disabilities require fixing or they're less than, and it defines people by their disability. Some forms of ableism can range from obvious aggression to less obvious everyday interactions. So, you may hear insensitive comments like, oh, you're acting so bipolar today, or you don't look disabled, as if that's a compliment. It's totally not. We can find ableism in our failure to create accessible websites. So if you're going to a website and they don't offer text enlargement features, right? That's not making that website accessible. Or if you choose a venue for a health fair and you don't consider transportation barriers for people using motorized scooters or wheelchairs. There are even health professionals who assume that having a disability inevitably leads to a lower quality of life, and that's not true. So sometimes they might incorrectly blame a new symptom on a person's disability, or they may even refuse certain care measures simply due to the belief that nothing will help them. All of this is untrue, and it can lead to barriers to receiving quality healthcare services and resources, and can further contribute to avoidable illnesses and death. So as we do our part to ensure inclusivity and accessibility of our services and our resources, I want you to know that we're just not creating something new, something else for us to do, right? We're not here to complicate the work that you're already doing in the communities as you go out and speak with community members and present your PowerPoints and present all this health information, right? We're not trying to complicate this. But for the sake of time, I won't go into the details about all the different standards and regulations, but there are federal laws and regulations in place that ensure equal access to information and functionality, specifically with technology. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 508, and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, these are widely respected as providing the best path to accessibility compliance. And there's a lot of information out there regarding these standards. So feel free to visit the web links provided on this slide if you're interested in learning more. All right, so now we can get into the nitty-gritty, right? As health professionals, one of our main methods of communication is, of course, the PowerPoint. But you would be surprised at how often presentations are given to a group of individuals and people really miss important information simply by the design of the PowerPoint alone. So forget what you even wrote on the slide. If your design isn't accessible, people are missing the information that you're trying to present. So today, we're going to learn how do we best create and use the PowerPoint in a way that ensures accessibility and inclusivity. And these steps actually follow those federal standards and regulations that I just shared in the previous slide. So we're going to talk about basic slide layout and design, how to include visual content like pictures and data charts and use alt text. We'll further discuss meaningful hyperlinks or web links. We'll also talk about how to perform a test for accessibility, how to use our outline and notes panel to ensure readability. Right? So we have a lot to cover. We'll talk about how to save your PowerPoint presentations. There is so much to cover. And these are we're just barely scratching the surface on accessibility and PowerPoints. So I'm going to provide some knowledge checks throughout the presentation to ensure that this information is sticking to our brains, right? Because that's what's important. So I highly recommend you grab some water, grab a snack, pay attention and take some notes. But I am just so excited to know that you all are here willing to learn with me and to progress forward in a way that is inclusive for all people. So let's get started. All right, so Microsoft PowerPoint actually contains a collection of preset slide layouts and built-in designs with accessibility already in mind. So Microsoft PowerPoint kind of does some of the work for you. We want to use these preset templates and designs when building your presentation. Your slide layout is probably one of the most significant steps that can be taken to ensure accessibility in your presentation. So I'm going to practice. You might see me bounce between presentation mode and edit view, but bear with me. I do this because I want to show you exactly how to access some of the accessibility features of PowerPoint. Okay, so for slide layout and design, I'm going to close out my presenter's view, and we're going to go to this next slide. Okay, what you're going to want to do is when you open up PowerPoint and you start a new slide, you're going to right-click your mouse, scroll down to layout, and you're going to pick one of these designs that best fits the content that you want to include. The idea here is that whatever preset boxes here, text boxes, content placeholders is what we call them, you want to keep your pictures, your data charts, and all of your content within these content placeholders. So no matter which layout you pick, I'll even pick another one for you just to show you an example. Let's do title and content. You want to make sure that your content stays within those placeholders, okay? All right. We don't want to add any additional text boxes because what that does, it actually complicates the reading order, and some people who use assistive technologies or what's known as screen readers, they will not be able to get that content that's in that, that's outside of the content placeholders, okay? Again, you want to avoid adding any text boxes because it complicates the reading order. And again, the assistive technology. So for those who aren't familiar with screen readers, it's an assistive technology that actually talks back to the person using it. So that screen reader will read the content on the slide out loud, so that person may have visual impairments or vision deficiencies. They'll be able to see or access the content that's on the slide, okay? This technology, again, will either completely ignore the content in the added text boxes, or will read the text box kind of out of order, okay? So you don't want to add text boxes, just use the content placeholders that are available. Another thing you want to consider as you develop your slides, be sure to give each slide a unique title. You want to let your audience know what you're going to talk about on each slide. If your content requires more than one slide, consider adding a number or the word continued to the slide. So you'll see on this slide and on the next, it says slide layout and design 1 of 2, and then slide layout and design 2 of 2, okay? So you want to also avoid automatic transitions and animations. I remember in high school when we had to do PowerPoint presentations, I loved having my slides come in from the left or the right, or fizzling from the bottom, or doing some kind of fancy movement and sounds. And it was so entertaining to watch, right? But those aren't accessible. They look really cool and make the presentation a little more lively and definitely entertaining. But they can be very distracting and can actually cause screen readers and assistive technologies to completely misread the content on the slides. You also want to make sure that you're limiting the number of slides, of lines of text on each slide. So sometimes less really is more. Keep your content to 5 to 7 lines of text, text max if you can, okay? The slides will be cleaner and they'll be easier to read and comprehend. Another consideration is to provide sufficient color contrast on all of your slides. Make sure the colors of your text and your background are what's known as high in contrast. And this makes it easier for people with visual impairments to read the content. For example, I use a dark or black text on a white or light background. This is high color contrast. It's easy to read when visually looking at the slide and when it's printed. If you want to emphasize a word or a phrase, right? We want to either underline or bold the text instead of using a color. A lot of times people will highlight a phrase using red font, okay, to emphasize a word. But that red text is often very difficult to read for people with color vision deficiencies. So if we look towards the bottom of this slide, we'll look at what's known as the color contrast scale. This first circle to your left is what a person with no color vision deficiency would see, right? So they can distinguish the different colors on the color wheel. They can see the reds and the yellows and greens without any issues. But as we go across the spectrum, that same color wheel going across, you can see how it's different for people with different color deficiencies. For example, circles 2 and 3 show what a person may see if they have either green or red color deficiencies. And these are the most common color deficiencies that exist. Circle 4 is what an individual would see if they have blue or yellow color deficiencies. And then circle number 5, the last circle to your right, is what someone may see if they have total color blindness. So while total color blindness is the rarest form of color deficiency, it's still one we have to consider, right? Again, we don't know who's in our audience. So if you want to test the color contrast of your presentation, you can actually change your presentation view from color to what's known as grayscale. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, you're going to go, let me see if I can move this out of the way. And I can't, so let's see. Bear with me here, I apologize. And you can see my desktop, clearly I have a lot of work. I am unable to access my view tab. So bear with me. I apologize. Let me see if I can move. Okay, let me just go here. Okay, so yes, you'll go to your View tab, you will click Grayscale, and you will see that all of the color has been stripped from your slides. Now, again, my text is high in contrast, so I can see my Black text in white background without any issues. But now if you look at the color contrast scale, it's hard to decipher which color is which. I can see some are dark, I can see some are light, some are mid-tone. But this is just something to keep in mind as you create your PowerPoints. You want to make sure that you're using colors that are easy to decipher, whether they're dark or light, especially if you're using data tables or charts, okay? So I'm going to go back to my color view and do the full screen. All right. Okay, so now that we've got our slide layout together, let's talk specifically about font and text size. You will want to use what's known as sans serif font, okay? These are your font types like Verdana, Calibri, or Arial. Sans serif font, like Times New Roman, have little tiny strokes at the ends of their letters. So if you look on our slide, I have sans serif to the left, and is written in Arial. And then to the right, I have Times New Roman. And if you look closely, you'll see the little ticks at the ends of the letters, particularly in the capital F, the capital T's, capital N's, right? We want to make sure we're not using serif font. Those tiny little ticks and those tiny little strokes can actually cause the letters to blur together, making it really hard to read for people who may have dyslexia or other neurocognitive disabilities. It can also make it hard to read for screen readers or people using assistive technologies to comprehend the text on the slide. So again, we want to use sans serif. Sans means without in French, and for accessibility, without is a good thing. Okay, we want to use the fonts without the little tiny strokes. But whatever sans serif font you use, you want to be consistent throughout the entire PowerPoint. So use only one font, only one, okay? We also want to avoid any animated text or those fancy shadow glow effects that have the cool colors. Again, these features, although they are fun, they can be extremely distracting and really hard to read, as all of that extra stuff can decrease your color contrast and make it hard for screen reader technologies to talk back what is on your slide. They can actually even cause issues for people who are experiencing access or connection issues. So consider your audience who lives in what's known as a technology desert, right? Maybe they don't have good Wi-Fi in their neighborhood. Or maybe someone is just sitting in a coffee shop that doesn't have great Wi-Fi connection, or maybe they're driving in their car trying to listen to this presentation. All of these added features can actually cause further disruptions in receiving relevant content in the presentation. So since PowerPoint presentations are also most likely projected onto a large screen, I know right now we're virtual, but the world is starting to open back up, right? So we might be in a room full of people one day and you're gonna have a PowerPoint on the screen, but we wanna consider how far the audience will be seated and choose your font size accordingly. The general rule of thumb here, you don't want your font size to be any less than 24 points. You also want to be sure that you're not using more than 3 different text sizes per slide. So for example, my header text is size 36, my content is 28, and then my subtext is 24. That way I still have that minimum font size, okay? And then finally, you want to make sure that you are avoiding any kind of acronyms or abbreviations. Screen readers may not be able to decipher these items, right? So if we think back to our federal regulations, one of the things they recommend is explaining an abbreviation at least the first time that you use it. So if I'm talking about the United States, right, I want to spell out the word United States, and in parentheses I might put US. But if I'm using screen reader technology, they might read US as the word us instead of United States, or abbreviation United States. So this, of course, can really confuse people who are trying to follow along and who aren't able to see our slides. All right, so now let's talk about visual content and alternate text. Many of us like to add photos and videos and graphs. And for those who work at health facilities, like I work at the health department, we have a lot of data tables and data charts. And they really just help us further portray whatever the health message is that we're trying to get across, right? Whenever you use visual content, you must add alternate or what's known as alt text to describe your visual. If you do not, your screen reader technologies will not be able to explain to the viewer what is being portrayed. They might simply say the word image or skip, and the person trying to access that content will completely miss the importance of that data chart or whatever visual it is that you're trying to provide. All right, so I'm gonna show you an example of how to use alt text. I'm gonna close out my full screen view. And so whenever you add a visual, you're gonna right click that visual. You'll scroll down to where it says edit alt text, and your alt text pane will pop up. And what you want to do is you really just want to write a very short description of what this photo shows. So for example, I might write woman dialing 911 for an emergency. Okay, and that will be my alt text. So now when somebody is looking at this slide, the screen reader will say image, woman dialing 911 for an emergency. So now they'll be able to understand what image I am showing, okay? So for anybody who uses Twitter, you want to keep it short, right? 140 characters is best. Keep it short, keep it simple, okay? General guidelines for alt text. When it comes to using your alt text, context is key. You want to be sure that you are describing exactly what the image is conveying. But in doing so, you also don't want to be repetitive. So if the information is found somewhere else on your slide or on the website, you can exclude it from the alt text, right? You don't want to be repetitive. On the same hand, if your image is purely decorative, like if you just have a pretty picture, you can use what's called a null or an empty alt text alternative. So I have here, you'll just write the word alt, the equal sign, and then your quotations, open and close quotations. And this will be recognized by screen readers, and they will either skip the image or just say the word decorative or decorative image. Some versions of PowerPoint even have a little small box now that you can just select with the word image is decorative. So they make it easy for you, okay? Again, you want to be concise. Limit your description to 140 characters or less, just a few short words or a short sentence. You also never want to use the words image of or picture of. One thing about that, it's taking away the use of characters. So save yourself some characters and don't write those words. But also, it's kind of repetitive. I know I'm looking at it at a visual of something, right? So you don't have to say image of or picture of. Now, I'm sure the concept of alt text is new to many. And for those of us who are familiar with it, we still sometimes often misuse it. I know for me, I still find myself writing the words image of or example of when I'm adding alt text. I always have to go back and make sure, did I say that again? And like erase it and make sure that I'm using my alt text correctly. So I want to practice with a couple examples. I just have two. Usually when I give this presentation, I have about 3 or 4, but I'll spare you all today. But for this first example, we have a picture from a website of a dog with a caption that reads, "Off-duty guide dogs often wear a bell. Its ring helps the blind owner keep track of the dog's location." If you were responsible for adding alt text to this image, what would be the appropriate use? Remember, you want to keep the 3 things in mind. What does the image convey? Is the information found somewhere else? Or is this image purely decorative? So what would you write? I'll give you a second to guess. Would you write image of off-duty guide dog wearing a bell? Would you just note the image as purely decorative by using the null text alternative? Would you say dog with bell attached to its collar or white and brown dog? Julie,
Shania, we have all C's in the answer so far. Everyone is saying C. Oh, we have 1 A and 1 B, another B.
Okay, so
Still
a little
mostly
bit of a
C.
mix. Okay. a little bit of mix, but mostly C. So yeah, so for this website, the image is used to supplement other information. So it supplements the text that's next to it, right? So your alt text should describe the information that is displayed visibly, but is not explained in the text. So yes, in this case, for those who said C, you are correct. It is the dog with the bell attached to its collar. Very good. All right, let's try our second example. On this website, the creator used an image of the COVID-19 vaccine bottle, right? With a link to COVID-19 vaccination information. What would be the appropriate alt text to use? So again, what does your image convey? Is this information found somewhere else on the page? Or is this image purely decorative? So what are your thoughts?
Okay, now we are getting mostly C. Someone says, why? Oh, someone had a question about the dog. Why isn't the fact that the dog was an off-duty dog important in the other example?
Oh, so yeah, so that's actually a dog that is used for an individual with disabilities. And I have to remember, when a dog is off duty, there's something about that bell, and you have to forgive me, I'm a little removed from it now, but it's something, so dogs that are used for disabilities, they have time where they're off duty, where their owner doesn't necessarily need them for the service, and then there's time when they're on duty. So that use of that bell lets the owner know that their dog who is off duty or not near them is nearby. So if the dog is walking around, that sound signals to the owner that the dog is nearby.
I'm not sure, Shania, but I think she might have meant why did you choose the answer that didn't say the dog was off duty?
Okay,
I think it might be because that was already explained in other text.
It was already, I'm sorry if I misunderstood your question. Yes, that's because it was already explained in the text.
Okay, and so we have mostly C's for this next one. We have a couple B's, mostly C's. One person said that the choice said image of unnecessary. It's unnecessary. And then, yeah, someone said that information was already in the text, maybe in response to the question. So yeah, most people said C again.
Okay, well, this image is actually going to be considered decorative. So we mentioned that this is COVID-19 vaccine in the text or in the hyperlink that's provided. So this would just be supplemental. Okay, this illustration of the COVID-19 vaccine bottle is used to basically just further identify or give another identification of the link, of what's on this link. Okay, so it also kind of helps drive you to want to click that area, but it really doesn't add any other information that's not already provided in the adjacent link. Okay, so in this case, adding alt text would be a little redundant, and so you can use that empty alt text or just mark it as decorative. Okay, so using alt text, it takes practice. I'm telling you, I still don't get it right, and I'm getting, I have presentations sent to me all the time, like, what's the alt text for this? What's the alt text for this? And a colleague of mine, we sit there and we banter back and forth, which would be the best alt text to use. So it does take a lot of practice. At the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you use some type of alt text when you're adding images. Okay. You want to make sure that your visual content is meaningful and it provides context to your presentation. All right, so when you're adding visuals to your slide, you also want to make sure, remember we talked about those content placeholders? We want to use those for our photos and our graphs and things as well. So again, I'm going to kind of close out here and show you my next slide. All right, so I have my layout here. And you'll see some small icons in the middle. Okay, you have an icon for inserting a data table, a chart, some images, whatever you want to include, you want to use the icon that corresponds with the visual content that you want to include, okay? This will allow that picture or that image to stay within the content placeholder so that your screen readers can identify that information on the slide for you, okay? A lot of times we copy and paste our images to the slide. We cannot do that because if we do, our screen reader technologies will not identify that information, okay? So remember, do not copy and paste. Always use the content placeholders, okay? Something to get used to because I'm quick to copy and paste, but we want to use those content placeholders. All right, so moving on, screen readers and individuals with visuals or cognitive impairments may also have issues with text imagery like word clouds, shapes, even smart art. So we want to try to avoid these as best as possible. Is it one of those things where you can't use them? I won't say you can never use them, but just be mindful of when you do, okay? Try to avoid these as best as you can. Also, again, if you are using audio or video, be sure that you have captioning or text transcripts provided to your audience, okay? And if you're in person, you wanna make sure that you can hear the audio and see the video from all points of the room. All right, data tables and charts. At the health department, we use a lot of data tables and charts in our presentations. And I'm looking at the time and I see that I'm a little bit behind, so I might kind of speed past a couple of these examples, okay? But when we're using our data tables and charts, again, we're gonna use that content placeholder and we're gonna select the option to include data tables and charts, okay? The only thing about when we use bar charts, it is really hard to explain what a bar chart is trying to say in just 140 characters, right? Because we have to use alt text for this too. So when we use a bar chart, we are going to write the words, full text description on next slide. And let me see if my alt text actually has that. Yep, I write the phrase full text description on next slide, okay? And so that way, my next slide is actually going to be the text description for that bar chart example. And I'm going to literally describe what that previous data table shows, explaining how to read it directionally, as well as the values for each series, okay? So it gets a little complicated, but again, any visual content that you have to use alt text. All right, so let's do our first knowledge check. I know we covered a lot, but I know we definitely honed in a little bit on alt text and that can be a little tricky, but let's look at an example slide. So don't worry so much about the content of the slide, but just by looking at it, can you identify 3 errors on this slide? Julie, if you mind kind of reading any of the feedback in the text in the chat box?
Sure, no problem. People say the colors, red is a no-no. Yep, red font, small font, someone says, too small, color and size, red, too many lines. Yeah, a lot of people said too many lines. Character spacing, that's interesting. Shadow text. One said shadow text. Yep, not enough line spacing, too much text. Yep, same red font, small, too many lines.
Great, yes, absolutely. The font color is too difficult to read. We want to avoid that red font. Also, it is too small. Very good for the person or two who said that. The font size is too small. I know it might seem larger for those who are looking at their computers, but if I'm projecting this on a screen, I won't be able to see this from way back in the room. All right, and yes, there are also too many lines of text. We want to keep it to 5 to 7 lines of text. So the best thing to do with this slide is to make it 2 separate slides. So you would have disability types one of 2, and then disability types 2 of 2. So very good.
One person also said the font color saturation is too high and too bright.
I will give them that. Yes, it's really hard to stay away from red. Stay away from the red if you can. Please, it's really hard to see. Awesome, great. So thank you all for paying attention and really kind of grasping this information. I know it's a lot. So let's move on a little bit, okay? Let's move on to hyperlinks and web links. Now, we oftentimes use a lot of websites on our presentations because we want to guide our viewers to content or resources on a specific web page. We want to make sure that we are using meaningful hyperlinks that provide context and describe where the link is taking us, rather than just simply providing some long random URL, right? Or saying something like, click here, or more info. What am I clicking? Where are you trying to take me? In a world full of viruses and spam and all types of stuff, we want to make sure that we are as clear as possible to where our links are taking us. So there's 2 ways that you can show your websites. If it's a short web link like google.com, you can add that website in full. Or if it's a really, really long random URL, you can hyperlink that text and just give it a title. Google's accessibility page. And so if I click that, it's going to take me directly to Google's accessibility page. All right, so how do we hyperlink our text? I'm going to show you this example here. In the example I have, it says, visit the Howard County Local Health Improvement Coalition website for local disability resources. So I may want to highlight the word local disability resources. I'm going to right-click that text, click the word link, and then I will have an address field. So I'm going to make this website up, www.hclhic.org/disability resources. I'm making that up. That's not the real website. I'm going to click OK. And now my information is hyperlinked. My phrase is hyperlinked. So if I click that, it is going to take me to the HCLHIC's resource page for people with disabilities. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to add what's known as a screen tip. Now, screen tip is a new concept for people, but we look at them often. So for example, if I hover over the B in my font tab, this little box that popped up, this is what's known as a screen tip. If I hover over to my font color, or maybe not, my paragraph, now I have where it says center your content. That is a screen tip. The same thing applies here, okay? Right now, my screen tip is a really long URL. I don't want that. So I'm gonna highlight the word screen tip. Again, I'm gonna right click, edit link. I have my long web address here, but I'm gonna click the word screen tip. And maybe I wanted to say, this link is going to show me how to add screen tips. Okay, click OK, OK. And now when I hover over the word screen tip, I don't have that long URL anymore. It's now shortened to how to add screen tips. So I know that if I click this link, it's going to take me to a web page that describes how to add screen tips. Okay. Awesome. Our outline view and our notes panel. So we want to ensure that the title of our content, the body text, and the reading order is correct and visible on each slide when we view our presentation. So to do that, and I told you it's a lot of back and forth, so forgive me, but we are going to, oh boy, I'm sorry, you all. I don't know if you can see, but I have this big box kind of in the way of my presentation, so I can't reach some of the tabs. Oh, let me move it. Can I move it? There we go. Some of the tabs on my slide here. Okay, let's do this. So I'm going to go to my View tab. I'm going to select Outline View. Maybe. Yep. And if you look to the left side, the order in which your presentation will be read by a screen reader can actually be seen here. And you can actually edit the content that's here as well. So keep in mind, though, any visual content, so you see I have a picture on the slide, it does not appear in Outline View. Okay, and that kind of just is how this works. Also, anything in my notes panel will not show up in my Outline View. So make sure that any content that you want your participants to see, you don't have that listed in your content, in your notes panel, okay? I'm gonna go back to my normal view. Reading order. All right, so you've created your PowerPoint and now you're ready for some finishing touches. One thing to do before running a test for accessibility is to make sure that the reading order on each slide is exactly how you want it. So you can check your reading order by going to your Home tab. Gonna go click Arrange in your drawing pane, and then you're gonna click Selection pane. Now, if you look to the right, my reading order pane pops up. Now, we typically read things from top to bottom. A screen reader is gonna read things from bottom to top. So the first thing that my assistive technology or my screen reader will read is the title. The next thing it will read is all of the content within that placeholder. So you wanna make sure that each slide, your reading order is exactly how you want it. You want your screen reader to talk back that information to you in the proper order. If it's not in the order that you want, you can switch it around, okay? So now my content is read first and then my title is read last. So you can always switch it around, okay? Yes, so that looks backwards to us. The next thing that we want to do, once we have finished developing our presentations, we want to perform a test for accessibility. So this should be done before you send your slides via email or post them on the internet, okay? If you have screen reader technology, let me close this out. If you have screen reader technology, you want to do this test for accessibility, okay? So how we do this, we are gonna go to our File tab. We're going to check for issues and then check for accessibility. If you look to the right, all of these warning signs for my reading order pop up, okay? So this is just a note to me to make sure that I go to each slide and ensure that the reading order is exactly how I want it, okay? And this is for every single slide. So you wanna make sure that you do that, okay? It's really, really important. If you're missing alt text, your alt text warnings are gonna pop up as well, okay? So all of those things are gonna be explained here. It's a really, really great feature. I highly recommend everybody use it. And another thing that you can do, if you are actually working with individuals with disabilities or organizations that work with individuals with disabilities, ask them for their user feedback, send them the presentation. We've done that. I've sent a presentation to one of the local organizations here and asked them for their feedback, and they've provided that to me. So it's great to use the partners and the organizations around you for that as well. And then I've checked for accessibility using the feature here. All right, the last thing you want to do is to make sure you are saving your presentation in a way that is accessible to everyone. So you're going to want to save this as a PDF or portable document format. So to do that, you're going to click File, you're going to save a copy. It might be a little different for me here. Yep. Well, that's because I already have it saved. But I'm going to go more options. Nope, that's not working either. So we're just going to go back. You're going to go to File, Save As, and you're going to choose PDF as your file type. Then another option is going to pop up. You're going to make sure that there are two boxes in there under Include Non-Printing Information. And I know it's a little hard to see that now because I can't show you that. But you're going to make sure those boxes are checked off, click OK, and then save. Doing this is actually going to ensure that all of your accessibility features are saved within your document. So all of your alt text, all of your hyperlinks, your reading order, all of that will stay the same if you save it as a PDF. Something else to consider, PowerPoints are really large documents, right? So for people, again, who may live in technology deserts, it's going to be really hard to save or to open really large files. So if we save it as a PDF, the file is a lot smaller and they'll be able to access it as well as the features that are in there as well. So I highly recommend you save as a portable document format or PDF. All right, last knowledge check. Looking at this slide, and again, content isn't necessarily important, but just by looking at this slide, what are 3 areas that you can identify? So think about the hyperlinks, think about color, font, all of those things that we talked about. This one might be a little tricky.
Okay, so a lot of people say the link too long, many font sizes. It says click here. There's orange in the slide. The URL is too long. Yep, the color contracts, small text in the image. Yep, the click here again, people mention.
Great. Oh, you all are on it. I really appreciate it. This is great. Yes. So for those who are looking at this, one, this image actually has no alt text, but you wouldn't know that unless you're developing this slide. But you're right, the orange color is not necessarily recommended, but also some people say that you shouldn't use images that have text over another image. So right now we have wording over like the map of Maryland. That's actually not accessible either. So it's very good that some of you pointed that out. And you're right, the text is too small. Very good. I think someone mentioned that the link was too long. Absolutely. It is way
and
too
obscure
long.
too, someone mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. Correct. You all are all of you are correct. This link is definitely too long. So instead, you can actually hyperlink a phrase that might just say CDC disability webpage, right? And then you'll hyperlink this website to that phrase. So that's how we can shorten that. And then the word click here, I think somebody mentioned, right? By saying click here, I don't really know where you're taking me. I know it says that this is how I can register, but is this really where I'm going? I don't know. So instead, you can just hyperlink the word register or registration, okay? And then that helps kind of clean up your slides a little bit too. So very good, very, very good.
Janae, we have a bunch of questions, so just want to make sure that we have room for it, time for it at the end. We're good, but just letting you know.
Okay, perfect. I'm finishing up now, actually. So thank you. So I know we covered a lot, from the importance of disability awareness to creating accessible PowerPoints. And it really is a lot of information and stuff I'm still learning even today. But it is meaningful, and it really is super important that we be inclusive and utilize all of these tools to make sure that we're getting our health information out to everyone. So my suggestion to you is practice, practice, practice. Pull up your old PowerPoints, try to revamp them, make them new, freshen them up a little bit, make them more accessible. Have a colleague double check your presentation, seek input from other organizations that work with people with disabilities, ask them for their user feedback, and then feel free to use this presentation or some other resources online. There are so many. For example, if you go to our disability resource page for the Howard County Local Health Improvement Coalition, we provide a list of resources available to you, as well as some of those federal laws and regulations that I mentioned earlier. And if you would like more information about the organization that I work for at the health department and some of the work we do in the county, feel free to visit our webpage, follow us on social media, and sign up for our communication channels, or you can contact us via email as well. And of course, if I don't get to your questions here, feel free to call me, feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to answer your questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'm going digging for it, because again, this is a learning process and experience for us all. So I just want to personally thank you all so much for your time today, and just for your willingness to really embrace something new to make our community a little more equitable and inclusive for everybody. So thank you so much. And at this time, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer as best as I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shanae. First, there's tons of thank yous. Amazing, great. We'll have to watch it again. Excellent. So people really got a lot out of this. And so yeah, and there are a bunch of questions too. So just a quick, well, actually, let me ask this one first. So do people usually use screen readers during a live presentation, like a webinar?
So that's a really good question. There are some technology, assistive technologies, excuse me, it's lunch, my time, and I'm hungry, so my brain doesn't work very well, that can translate live for you. And then there are others where if you're just joining the webinar later, or if you have a link that you can use that assistive technology, that will provide that for you later. So yes.
Okay, great, great. And then a bunch of questions about alt text. So first, a real quick one. Does alt text show up in the outline view?
Ooh, good question. I do not think that it does. I don't ever remember seeing alt text in the outline view. So it is more so, again, for the people who are using screen reader technology.
Okay, great, thanks. And then someone wants to know, are there forbidden characters in alt text? So in InDesign, when I add alt text, certain characters generate an error. Does this happen in PowerPoint?
So I have seen some of my colleagues use certain characters that will not appear when they're using the alt text. So my answer is yes, just because I've seen that, but what specifically they are, I would have to do some deeper research.
Okay, great, great. And then someone also wanted to know, you're talking about sans serif and serif fonts. So some fonts make it hard to distinguish the characters like one, I, and lowercase l. So like when you're using them for numbers, I mean, do you have any other suggestions on which fonts are the easiest to distinguish these things?
So general rule of thumb, as long as it's sans serif, you should be okay. I typically try to stick with Arial or Calibri. I know Calibri is a little bit smaller, so if I'm trying to get more information on a slide, I'll kind of switch to Calibri. But I did notice that with Calibri, the L's and the ones are kind of similar. So depending on what I'm presenting or what kind of content I'm using, I kind of make my choice based on that. But I typically stick to Arial or Calibri, and I've noticed other presenters who are well-versed in accessibility, those are the two go-to fonts that they use as well.
Great, great. Here's one on screen tips. I often hover and use the link text to verify the page it points to before I click it. To change it to something more readable affects this. So obviously accessibility is important, but we have to be smart with the links too. So how do you decide which is most important?
That's a very good question, actually. One that I can only speak to personally. I know, yeah, because you're right. If I'm using a screen tip, how do I know what link it's taking me to? I don't like, you gotta trust and believe. But I think if you are so say for instance, I've referenced the CDC website, right? I've referenced CDC a few times. That's something that I wouldn't necessarily spell out because CDC is a trusted resource, people use it often. And if that's something that I'm referencing and that I'm talking about, I would assume that the audience trusts that I'm going to take them to that site. Now, if it's something a little more foreign or unfamiliar, then I would say that it would be okay to put the link, as long as it's nothing too crazy and some random letters and numbers, etc. Because the idea is to make things as simple as possible. Again, we don't know who's in our audience, and you just want to make sure that we're not confusing anybody or making things complicated or making it hard for them to read or comprehend.
Great, thanks. Yeah, quick one about writing numbers. Does the screen reader read the number 1, or should we write out 1 in letters?
That's a good question. So what I have seen other people who are well-versed in accessibility do, they will write the word 1, and then in parentheses, they will have the number written.
Okay,
so
great.
As long as you do that first, kind of like that general, this is the first time I'm introducing it, same thing with acronyms and abbreviations, spell it out the first time, then anything preceding that, you should be able to just use the general number or the general acronym.
Great, great, okay. And just quick, when adding a hyperlink, do we need to say link to or not?
You shouldn't have to, just because hyperlinks are already underlined in that designated blue text. But if you do, it doesn't matter. It's okay either way.
Okay, great, great. Let's see, is there an accessibility checklist with the items that you presented today that
Absolutely.
you can run down? Yeah.
Absolutely. So I've actually developed one with one of my colleagues, and I guess I can maybe send that to Scarlett, or we can have, as a follow-up. But even if you Google it, there are plenty. I think Microsoft Office, if you go to their website, they might have an accessibility checklist. CDC has an accessibility checklist as well. And then there are other organizations who have kind of developed their own based on those. So they're definitely out there.
Great, great. Okay, let's see, we got that. Do you have any resources for making accessible flyers or PDF documents, social media videos? I know that's a big question, so it might be that we just have to sort of share some, some resources with people afterwards. Just something to think about.
Absolutely.
And then someone was asking about, I don't mean to dismiss that question, but we just have very little time. I think that's going to take a while, but we'll get answers to people. If the questions we don't get to, we will get you some answers. Someone asked about QR codes. What are your thoughts about using those?
So yeah, that's definitely a growing trend. QR codes are okay to use, as long as you include alt text to explain that this is a QR code that's taking you to whatever it's taking you to. In a presentation I just reviewed, there was a QR code to their post training survey. And one of the error messages that I got when I checked for accessibility was that it had no alt text. So again, it's an image, right? It's visual content. So anytime we use visual content, you always want to make sure you are using alt text. And if you want to include the link to where it's taking you, I don't think that would be a problem either.
Great, great. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think we're going to have to save the other few questions to get some answers to you all afterwards. Wow, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being so engaged and interested. We had so many questions, and Shania, thank you so much for answering everything and for that excellent excellent presentation. This is so useful, and I think everyone's going to be looking at the website. So I think if you go to the Health Literacy Solutions Center website, it will be there. I'm not sure exactly what page. I'm trying to get someone to find a link to that, but we will send you that information. And I'll also put out on the discussion list, exactly where everything will be. So I guess that's it. Yeah, so please, everyone look on the Health Literacy Solutions Center website for more great webinars coming up and more information like blogs and the discussion lists and other training information. Just again, if you'll get an online evaluation sent to you, and if you fill that out and submit it, you can get your CE credits. There's the website right there, healthliteracysolutions.org, and we'll tell you how to find the recording when it's there. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's in the chat there, how to find it. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Shanae, for this excellent presentation, and everyone have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.